I was born in England in the year 1632. My father was German, my mother English. I had two brothers, one sister, and a life many would envy. My father was a successful businessman, and because of him, we lived comfortably. I received a good education, wore clean clothes, ate warm meals. By all means, I had a good life, but deep inside me, there was a fire, a restless dream. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to sail the oceans. My father, though a kind and wise man, didn't share this dream. He wanted stability for me, not stormy skies and foreign lands. I remember the day clearly. I was 18 when he called me to his room. His voice was gentle, but firm. He asked, "Why do you want to leave this life? Why throw it all away for the sea?" He warned me, "Sailing is dangerous, it's not comfortable, you could die out there." And then he cried. My strong, proud father had tears in his eyes. That moment stayed with me. His words echoed in my mind: danger, discomfort, death. But alongside his fears, I also felt excitement, wonder, freedom. I couldn't shake the dream. I tried to speak to my mother, hoping she might understand. "Please," I told her, "help me speak to Father. I want to see the world. I want to live it, not just read about it." She loved me deeply, but her answer was the same. "The sea is no place for you. Stay home. England is your future." 1 year later, on September 1st, 1651, I went to the port town of Hull. There I met an old friend whose father owned a ship. They were about to set sail for London. "Come with us," he said. I hesitated. I wasn't prepared. I had no plan. But something inside me said, if not now, when? And so, I went. The first hour at sea was thrilling. The wind kissed my face. The horizon stretched wide. I felt alive. But soon, clouds gathered. The sky darkened. The wind howled. The waves grew wild. The ship rose and crashed like a toy. Fear gripped me. My heart pounded. I missed my home. I longed for my warm, safe bed. By morning, the storm passed. The sea calmed. The sun came out. It was a beautiful day. A sailor approached me. He cracked jokes, made me laugh. "What storm?" he said with a grin when I told him how scared I was. "That was just a breeze." He handed me a drink, and soon I was laughing too, drunk and drowsy. That night I slept like a baby. The next morning I barely remembered the fear. I looked at the sea again and felt only wonder. I began to dream again, not of safety, but of distant shores and grand adventures. For the next 3 days the wind was slow. We drifted, but when it picked up we raced across the waves. Then another storm hit, this one even worse, and this time even the experienced sailors looked afraid. The storm was terrifying. I was so scared I couldn't even stand. I lay frozen in my bed, heart pounding. When I looked out the window, my blood ran cold. The waves were enormous, like towering mountains. I saw other ships tossed about like children's toys, helpless against the fury of the sea. I wanted nothing more than to be home again. It was chaos. Everyone on board cried out to God for mercy. Then someone shouted. There was a hole in the ship. Water was pouring in. Panic swept through the crew. Men rushed below deck, pumping as fast as they could to push the water out. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move. But then a man grabbed my arm and yelled, "Come help!" I snapped out of my fear and followed him. We worked side by side, pumping with all our strength. Suddenly, a loud gunshot rang out. It was the captain's signal, a warning. The ship was in serious danger. I thought it was the end. The ship groaned and creaked. We were taking in too much water. We fought to save her, but the hole was too large. The weather improved, but the damage was done. The ship was sinking. Then, in the distance, we saw hope. Another ship. They sent a small boat to rescue us, risking their lives. One by one, we climbed in. There was no way back to their ship. It was too far. Just 15 minutes later, we watched our ship disappear beneath the waves. We were safe, but I was still shaken. Then we saw land. As we got closer, we noticed people waiting on the beach. They were from a nearby village. They welcomed us, helped us, and gave us some money to travel. I chose to go to London, by land this time. In London, I met a kind captain. He invited me on a new voyage, to Africa. He said there was good business there. He told me what goods to buy in England, things that were cheap here but valuable there. No one made them in Africa, but everyone needed them. We sailed. The journey to Africa was a success. I made money. I was proud. I wanted more. I wanted to travel again, do more business, and learn how to command a ship. The captain even began teaching me the basics of navigation. So I joined another voyage to Africa. At first, everything went well. Then, danger struck again. One morning, a ship appeared on the horizon. It followed us. A pirate ship. By afternoon, they caught up. They attacked, tried to tie their ship to ours, but we fought them off. The second time, they succeeded. Pirates stormed our ship. It was brutal. They smashed everything. Some of our men were killed. Others were badly hurt. We couldn't win. We surrendered. We were taken prisoner. I was young, strong, and unlucky. I became a personal slave to the pirate captain. My days were long and hard. I worked in the house and garden, obeying every order. My heart was heavy. I dreamed of freedom. One day, while working in the house, I met her, a young woman, a slave like me. She didn't speak my language, but her eyes, they spoke volumes. She smiled when she saw me. Sometimes, her hand brushed mine as she passed, just for a moment, but it meant everything. I couldn't stop thinking about her. She wasn't always there, but when she was, I felt alive. In my heart, she was mine, and I was hers. But slaves weren't allowed to love. We couldn't be together, not truly. Sometimes the pirate captain took me and a young boy fishing. We used a small boat, sometimes joined by the captain's friends. One day, a thick fog rolled in. We were lost at sea, drifting blind. We found land the next morning. When we returned, the captain decided to prepare a larger boat for longer fishing trips. He ordered me to load it with food, water, and guns. He was expecting important guests. They never arrived. The next day he said, "Prepare the boat for fishing again." This was my chance. The boat was ready. Food, weapons, everything we needed. That night I made my plan. I would escape. Finally, I could be free, but my heart ached. I thought of the young woman. I wanted to take her with me. But how? It was impossible. I didn't know what to do. I stood between freedom and love. Then morning came. I saw her in the house, more beautiful than ever. Our eyes met. She knew. Somehow, she knew this was goodbye. She touched my hand gently. There were no words, only a silent, sad goodbye in our eyes. She smiled, just a little, then walked away. It was the last time I saw her. An hour later, the boy and I were ready. One of the captain's friends joined us. He would be our overseer for the day. But I had other plans. We were far from land. When I made my move, I pretended I didn't know how to fish, so our overseer, our boss for the day, told us to go further out. When we were finally far enough from the coast, he walked to the front of the boat, looking for a better fishing spot. That was the moment. I didn't hesitate. I shoved him into the sea. He splashed and fought to swim back, but I grabbed a gun. When he saw it, he stopped. He turned and swam away, disappearing into the endless water. Then I turned to the boy. For a second, I didn't know what he would do. Would he help me or betray me? But when I looked into his eyes, I saw it. He was with me. After 2 years, I was free. We set sail immediately, pushing the boat as fast as we could. The wind was strong and in our favor. By the next day, we were far from pirate territory, but I still couldn't shake the fear. I didn't let the boy stop the boat for 5 whole days. I wouldn't let the pirates catch us again. On the 6th day, I finally allowed us to get close to land. We spotted a narrow river. We didn't know where we were, but we needed fresh water. As night fell, we planned to go upriver, where the water wasn't salty, but that night was horrifying. Strange noises came from the darkness. Wild animals. The boy was terrified, and honestly, so was I. Then we heard something swimming toward us. The boy begged me to leave, but I stood my ground. I grabbed a gun and fired. The creature turned and swam back to shore. The gunshot scared the others away too. We stayed on the boat until morning, sleepless and shaken. We ate some dry bread for breakfast. The boy asked if we could go to the beach. We filled 2 bottles with fresh water. Then the boy asked to go inland. I didn't want to lose sight of the boat, so I stayed behind while he explored. He came back smiling, carrying a wild bird that looked like a chicken. He was so proud. I was proud too. At last we had good meat and clean water. We had no idea where we were. Somewhere along the African coast, surely, but it felt like no one lived there. No people, only distant roars and rustling from wild animals. Then, one morning, as we searched for more water, we saw it. A lion. It was on the beach, massive and powerful, just 20 meters from us. The boy froze in fear. The lion saw us and charged. Had no time. I fired my first shot. The bullet hit its leg, the second, its head. The lion slowed, wounded. One more shot. It collapsed. We couldn't eat the meat. It was too wild. But I wanted to keep the skin. We laid it across the top of the boat to dry. For the next 10 days, we continued our journey, stopping only for fresh water. Then one day, we saw something different. People. A whole group watching us from the beach. They had children with them. I wanted to go to them. The boy didn't. He was scared. The people offered food, dry meat, but they wouldn't come into the water, and we were hesitant to go ashore. Sensing our fear, they left the food on the ground and stepped back. When they were far enough away, we took it. Then everything changed. They smiled. We smiled. They came closer. We thanked them, though we had nothing to give in return. That's when we saw the danger. 2 animals charged out from the forest, heading straight for the people. One attacked a young girl. Without thinking, I fired. The first animal fell. The second turned and fled. The villagers stood frozen, then exploded in cheers. The girl was safe. They were grateful. They brought us more food, more water. We had everything we needed. We didn't stop again for 10 days. Then on the horizon, we saw islands. I thought maybe we could explore them. But the boy started yelling. He had spotted a ship. His voice shook with fear. He thought it was a pirate ship. I looked again. Portuguese. They hadn't seen us yet. I fired a shot in the air. They turned. They saw us. Soon, we were aboard the Portuguese ship. The crew spoke Portuguese, Spanish, French, languages I didn't know. But one man came forward, a Scottish sailor. I told him everything. After that, the crew treated us like friends. They welcomed us aboard. I offered the captain our supplies, but he refused. No, he said, I'd rather pay you. It was generous of him. I offered him the boat. I gave him a price, half of what it was worth. Take the rest as a gift, I said. He agreed. Then he turned to the boy. I could train him to be a sailor, but I didn't like the idea. He was just a boy. He had just escaped one kind of captivity. I didn't want him to fall into another. What he needed now was freedom. The boy had made up his mind. He wanted to work on the ship. He wanted to be a sailor. And so, with determination in his eyes and the sea in his blood, he began his training. The ship set its course for Brazil. After 22 days at sea, we arrived. It was time for goodbyes. I parted ways with the boy and the sailors, who had become like a second family. The boy was excited for his new life, and I knew he would do well. Still, saying goodbye wasn't easy. Brazil was a new world, a young state, full of hope and ambition. I knew no one when I arrived, but that didn't last long. I soon met plantation owners, men who grew sugar and carved lives out of the wild. They welcomed me into their circles, and I fell in love with Brazil. I learned the language quickly. The captain had paid me well for the boat, and with that money, I bought a small piece of land and began growing sugar. The first 2 years were hard. My crops were small and the work was endless. But then, things changed. My plantation flourished. I was alone, but not lonely. I was independent. Each month I earned more than the last. The taxes were low and the rules few. Brazil was still young and full of freedom. When I had enough money, I decided to hire someone to help around the house. I asked my friends if they knew a good woman. One of them smiled and said, "My daughter is 18. She's a hard worker and an excellent cook." The next day, she came to my home. She was sweet and shy, and truly beautiful. We spoke only briefly. I told her what I needed: cleaning, cooking, some company for my cat. The next morning she returned. She cleaned the floor, dusted the furniture, took out the rubbish. Quietly, efficiently. She came every Monday and Thursday. Each time she stayed for 4 hours. She cooked for me. She fed the cat. And every time, I found myself looking forward to her visits more and more. Sometimes we sat together for breakfast or lunch. We talked about small things, simple things. But I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Then, one week, she didn't come. She was ill, and in her absence, I felt the house grow cold, silent, empty. I missed her. Truly, deeply missed her. I began to wonder, was this love? A week later, she returned. The moment I saw her, my heart jumped. She smiled. So did I. I embraced her without thinking, and then gently, I kissed her. It was a long, warm kiss. 2 weeks later, I visited her father. I asked him if I could marry his daughter. He said nothing at first. The silence felt like hours. Then at last, he nodded. "I agree," he said softly. I was the happiest man in the world. 2 months later, we were married. That time in my life was golden. We made plans, big ones, a family, a future, a larger house, a stronger plantation. We wanted to grow, to thrive. But to do that, we needed more money, and my thoughts turned to Africa. There, I could earn quickly. Dangerous, yes, but profitable. I shared the idea with my friends. Some of them agreed, and so a new chapter began to form in my mind, one full of risk, but also possibility. Chapter: The storm and the island. One day, 3 of my closest friends came to visit. They had a plan, something bold. They wanted to sail to Africa. They asked me if I would join them. Without hesitation, I said yes. We began preparing for the journey at once, gathering supplies, inspecting the ship, mapping our course. When we were ready, I kissed my wife goodbye and promised I'd return in 2 months. We set sail from Brazil on September 1st, 1655. Our ship was large, but our crew was small, only 17 men. The ship was filled with goods: cups, glass, mirrors, knives, everything we needed for trade. At first, the weather was calm, hot but calm. But only a week into our journey, everything changed. A hurricane struck. The storm was terrifying. Screaming winds, massive waves, and chaos all around us. We held on for our lives. When the storm finally passed, we realized we were off course. Far off. We were near the Orinoco River, at the northern tip of South America, nowhere near Africa. The ship was badly damaged. The captain wanted to turn back for repairs. But I couldn't bring myself to return so soon. After some talk, we agreed to sail to Barbados instead, hoping to fix the ship there. We never made it. A second hurricane came, stronger than the first. The winds howled through the night. The sea roared with fury. Then one of the crew shouted, "Land!" But hope turned to panic. The ship struck shallow waters. It stopped abruptly, teetering dangerously. It could break apart at any moment. We had no choice. We had to abandon ship. 17 of us crowded into a small boat, far too small for so many. The sea thrashed around us. We rowed hard, desperate to escape. But then, a monstrous wave hit us. The boat capsized. I was thrown underwater. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. I thought I would die. Then, for a moment, I surfaced. I gasped. I saw a narrow beach between jagged rocks. Another wave hurled me forward. My feet touched land. I tried to stand, but I was too weak. Another wave pulled me under. Again I struggled to breathe. But then, another wave crashed, and it threw me onto the beach like driftwood. I clawed my way 10 meters inland and collapsed. I passed out. When I awoke, everything hurt. But I was alive. I looked around. No other men, no boat, just silence. All my friends were gone. All I found on the beach were 3 hats and 2 shoes. The sea had taken them all. The storm hadn't finished raging, but the waves were calmer now. Far in the distance, I could still see the ship. I had nothing. No dry clothes, no food, no tools. Only a small knife in my pocket. How could I survive? My first need was water. I walked inland and found a stream. I drank. I was terrified of wild animals, so I made a crude spear from a branch. That night, I climbed into a tall tree and slept, clutching the wooden weapon. The next morning, the sea was calm. I saw the ship still standing. I stripped off my clothes and swam toward it. At first, I found no way to climb aboard, but then, on the far side, I spotted a rope. I pulled myself up. The ship was eerily quiet. I searched for food and found some dry provisions and a bottle of rum. Then I heard something. A sound. My heart raced. Someone was alive? No. It was our captain's dog. He ran to me, tail wagging. Now I wasn't alone. I needed a way to get back to the island with all I'd found. I had no boat, so I built a raft using timber from the ship. I loaded it with food, the dog, and supplies. I also searched for clothes and found a box. Inside it, tools. Next to it, a rolled carpet. I kept searching and found 4 guns and dry gunpowder. I loaded everything on the raft and drifted back to shore. Back on land, I looked for a place to stay. I saw a hill. If I climbed it, I might understand where I was. I took a gun and climbed. From the top, I saw ocean on 3 sides. I was on an island. To the north and west, 2 small islands. To the south, land, far away, perhaps 100 kilometers. To the east, only endless ocean. No signs of people, only wild animals. Chapter: Building a home. On my way back from the hill, I saw many birds. I didn't know their names or if I could eat them. I shot one, but its meat was terrible. I returned to my raft and carried my supplies inland. I planned to return to the ship the next day. A storm could destroy it at any moment, and I needed everything I could salvage. I built a small tent near the beach. I stored everything there that might be ruined by sun or rain. When night came, I lay clothes on the ground and placed 2 guns by each shoulder. Surrounded by weapons, I finally felt safe. I slept deeply. The next day, I swam to the ship again. I built another raft and brought back even more. 7 guns, some beds, and useful tools. Every day, I returned. One day, I found candles. I needed those for nights. I also found 2 large boxes filled with tea. On one trip, I discovered a locked box. A key was hidden beneath it. Inside, coins from Europe and Brazil. Useless here, but I took them. I also found a deck of playing cards with pictures of kings and queens, something for the long, lonely nights. Then, one morning, dark clouds covered the sky. A storm was coming. I visited the ship but made no raft. It was too dangerous. That night, the storm came with fury, but I was safe in my little tent. The next morning, I looked out toward the sea. The ship was gone. Now I knew I might be here for a very long time. I had to build a real home. I searched for the perfect place, near fresh water, shaded, protected, with a view of the sea. I found it by a big hill. The hill guarded me from behind. I built a strong fence around the other sides. There was no door, only a ladder I could use to climb over the fence. It made me feel safe. I carried all my belongings inside, but I wasn't done. Yet I built 2 tents, one large, one small. The smaller tent was inside the larger, like a heart protected within a chest. This was my home now, and I was determined to survive. Chapter 10. The tent in the storm. After building 2 tents, one large enough to protect the food and gunpowder, From the relentless tropical rains and another smaller one where I lived, I began working on a cave at the base of the hill. My plan was to use the cave for food storage. The stones and soil I removed while digging were used to build a terrace inside the protective fence surrounding my camp. One stormy day, lightning flashed across the sky, and a terrifying thought struck me. If lightning hit the gunpowder, everything would explode, and I might be killed. As soon as the storm passed, I opened the large boxes of gunpowder and carefully divided the contents into smaller containers. Over 3 days, I hid them among the rocks. Hunting became both a break from my intense labor and a source of much-needed meat. Through this, I discovered wild goats and began learning about the island's wildlife. But loneliness often crept in. I missed my wife, my parents, and my friends in Brazil. Life on the island sometimes felt pointless. Still, I was alive. I had shelter, tools, clothes, and food. I decided to mark my survival and sense of time. I crafted a large wooden cross and placed it on the beach where I had first arrived. I carved the date, September 30th, 1659, on it and began using it as a calendar. Every day I made a small notch, with a larger one for each week and month. To fight off negative thoughts, I made a list of pros and cons. Sure, I was isolated and unlikely to ever see England again, but I had freedom, safety, and enough food. My dog, who had learned commands like sit, come here, and let's eat, was a small but comforting companion. I focused on improving my life. I expanded the cave, keeping my belongings well organized. My shelter slowly became a home. Chapter 11. The book and the cave. I needed furniture, so I used wood from the wrecked ship to build a chair and table, 5 days of hard work. Then I made shelves and arranged my tools, clothes, and guns neatly on the walls. I felt proud and organized. I began writing a journal about my days on the island, starting with my arrival. At first, I wrote every day, then later, once a week, recording only significant events. Life had settled into a routine: morning walks, afternoon labor, lunch and a nap, then more work until sunset. The cave was my all-in-one space: kitchen, living room, cellar, and sometimes bedroom. One day, part of the cave collapsed while I was outside. Lucky to be alive, I reinforced the cave with wooden beams to prevent another disaster. December brought 20 days of continuous rain, but the weather stayed warm, allowing me to continue work indoors. I also rescued an injured goat, which soon began eating from my hand. This gave me an idea. If I could tame animals, I wouldn't need to rely only on hunting. Chapter 12. Catching goats and growing corn in. January, I explored more of the island and found shy wild goats in the interior. I came up with a plan using my dog to help capture one. It almost worked, but the goat escaped after kicking me hard in the nose. I shifted focus and started reinforcing my fence. While doing so, I found wild pigeons nesting in rock holes, easy to catch and delicious to eat. One day, I emptied an old bag that had once held corn. A month later, to my amazement, green shoots appeared, young corn. I was overjoyed. It meant I could grow food. I now had hope of baking bread one day. March 16th brought an earthquake. The ground shook violently, stones tumbled from the hills, and my cave trembled. I ran outside, shaken and frightened. That night, I decided the cave was too risky to sleep, and instead I would build a proper house. Chapter 13. Dreams and Discoveries. In April, I began building my house. It took 3 months to complete. In July, I fell seriously ill, bedridden and feverish. Strange, vivid dreams followed. In one, I was in a pub on the island, scolded by a lazy waitress, visited by my wife, and then threatened by a gunpowder salesman. I woke up sweating and confused. A week later, I slowly recovered. To regain my strength, I walked the island for 10 days. It helped. Then I explored the center of the island and discovered a beautiful valley with a lake. There were melons, grapes, oranges, lemons, and apples, like paradise. I planned to bring the fruit back, but wild animals ate the ones I left behind. Still, I was captivated by the valley and visited often. I considered moving there but knew I had to stay near the beach to watch for rescue ships. Chapter 14. My second home. Though I didn't move, I started building a second home in the valley. Surrounded by a double fence and protected like a fortress, it took the rest of August and early September to complete. I used a ladder to get in and out, and stairs inside. I felt energized and healthy in the valley. On clear nights, I watched the moon and stars and thought of my family in England. Even though we were separated, we saw the same sky. That made me feel connected, not just to them, but to the entire universe. I questioned God. Why was I alone here? Why was I spared? Though I had no answers, I trusted that there was a purpose. When the rainy season ended in mid-October, I found my valley home hidden by thick green leaves. It was beautiful and safe. Inspired, I planted corn near my main home. The first batch didn't grow, but I saved some seeds. The second planting succeeded. Now I had a small farm and a new understanding of the island's seasons. 2 dry and 2 rainy seasons, not like the 4 I knew in England. With this knowledge, I could now plan my farming year more effectively. Survival had become not just possible, but purposeful. Chapter 15. The basket, the valley, and the paradas. I began exploring the island more and more. I realized something. I needed a basket. My hands could only carry so much, but with a basket, I could haul extra food, fruit, or tools during my trips. I cut branches from the same kind of tree I used to build fences. I dried them in the sun and wove them carefully into a strong basket. Once it was ready, I took it on a longer journey, this time beyond the valley where my second house stood. I walked through green grass fields filled with wildflowers. The air was sweet with their scent, and butterflies flitted around me. Some had wings nearly 10 centimeters wide, a splash of color against the sky. Near the fields, I discovered small trees bearing unfamiliar nuts, sweeter and shaped differently than the ones I knew from England. As I walked deeper into the unknown side of the island, I met new creatures, parrots, rabbits, and even gray cats. One parrot in particular caught my eye. I managed to catch it and was amazed by its colorful feathers. Red, green, purple, orange, blue, pink, and yellow all danced across its body. I took the parrot home with me. On the return journey, my loyal dog caught a young goat. I saved it and decided to keep it. Perhaps this was my second chance to raise goats. I left the little goat at my valley house, planning to prepare a safer home for it at my main shelter. But I was exhausted after the long journey. The next day, I did nothing but rest. When I had the energy, I built a cage for the parrot and moved the goat to my main home, where it slowly began to relax and trust me. Inspired, I drew a map of the whole island, marking the new discoveries, fields, nut trees, animal habitats. Time passed quickly. Before I knew it, September had returned, marking my second year on the island. I wasn't as sad as before. I had accepted my life. I had routines, peace, and purpose. My days followed a rhythm. I hunted in the morning, cooked at noon, rested when the sun was hottest, and worked in the evening. I even taught the parrot to say his name, Paul. By November, my corn needed attention. Wild goats and rabbits were eating the small shoots. I built a quick fence around the growing plants and even added a gate so I could come and go easily. I placed my dog inside the fence at night to guard the corn. But just as the plants grew taller, birds became a new problem. I shot some and kept watch day and night until they finally disappeared. Chapter 16. Bread and the Broken Canoe. By the end of December, I harvested my first corn. It wasn't much, but I didn't eat any of it. Instead, I saved it all as seed. My dream was to plant more and grow a bigger harvest next time. But I needed something to store the seeds, pots. I searched the island and eventually found clay. Making pots was much harder than I thought. In England, people made beautiful pottery, but I barely understood the process. Still, I didn't give up. After 2 months of trial and error, I managed to make 2 large pots. I protected them by placing them in round baskets, padded with dry grass. The results were promising, so I continued. I made smaller pots and eventually, some flat, wide ones. I poured seawater into these shallow pots. When the sun evaporated the water, it left behind salt. Another small but important success. Then one day, I noticed a broken piece of pot that had fallen into the fire. It had become red and hard as stone. That gave me an idea. I built a fire around one of my pots, letting it bake for hours. When it cooled, it was sturdy and strong. Now, with storage and salt figured out, I turned to making flour. I found a large block of hardwood, carved a hole into it, and used a second piece to crush the seeds inside the hole. The flour collected at the bottom. But how would I bake bread? I mixed the flour with water into dough. Then I took 2 stones, heated them near the fire until they were scorching hot, and placed the dough between them. And just like that, I had my first bread. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, satisfying, and it tasted like victory. This happened during my 3rd year on the island. My confidence grew, and with it came new ambitions. I thought, why not sail around the island? I decided to build a canoe from a huge tree. I cut it down and carved out the middle. It took many days. But then, disaster struck. The canoe was too heavy to move. It was deep in the forest, and between it and the sea stood a hill. I tried everything, pushing, dragging, even imagining digging a canal. Nothing worked. All those days of work, wasted. I had to abandon the canoe in the forest. It was a harsh lesson. I had to plan better next time. Chapter 17. During my 4th year on the island, my clothes had become worn and tattered, so I turned to the skins of animals I hunted. I crafted a cap and other garments from the tough, weather-resistant hides. They kept me cool under the scorching sun and shielded me from the heavy tropical rains. But clothes alone weren't enough. I also needed an umbrella. It took time, patience, and trial and error, but eventually I succeeded. With that, I felt prepared for whatever the island threw at me. Life on the island settled into a steady rhythm. 2 years after seeing the footprint, as I walked along the beach, I thought I spotted a canoe far out at sea. I hesitated but kept walking, until I saw the nightmare before me. The shore was littered with human remains, heads, hands, feet, fingers, and teeth scattered like grotesque debris. A charred black patch marked where a fire had burned. Rage and terror flooded me. The cannibals were back. I couldn't look away, but the horror in my gut forced me home. I pondered my next move. I decided not to risk the open sea in my canoe. I stood no chance against them there. Nor would I use guns openly. Their deafening shots could draw more unwanted attention. Still, I always carried firearms for protection. Even thought about fighting back. About killing some of the cannibals and rescuing prisoners, if there were any. I searched for hidden spots near the beach where I could prepare ambushes. But in the end, reason prevailed. These people hadn't attacked me yet, and I didn't know them. Perhaps attacking first would be a fatal mistake. So I stopped my preparations and resolved to act only if they attacked me first. Chapter 20. The cave. I became more cautious than ever, hiding my activities and trying to make as little noise as possible. Even making fire was risky. I needed it to cook, but smoke could drift far and betray my location. So I learned to build fires that smoked as little as possible. One day near the beach, I discovered a small cave tucked into the forest. I stepped inside cautiously, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I froze. A pair of eyes stared back at me. I leapt outside, heart pounding. For a moment, I waited, but nothing happened. Summoning my courage, I returned to the cave entrance and listened. Faint sounds, groans maybe. Someone was hurt. I gripped my gun and ventured back inside slowly. Deeper in the cave, I found an old goat, weak and dying. I returned the next day, but it had passed. The cave was quiet and safe, a perfect hiding place close to the beach. Brought some guns and gunpowder there, preparing for whatever might come. By now, it had been 23 years since I first arrived on the island. Life was comfortable. I had a thriving herd of over 30 goats, 3 parrots, including Pole, who now repeated my name and a few other words, and my loyal dog's memory lived on in my heart. Then, one early morning as I walked to my fields, I saw fire flickering on the beach. Alarmed, I hurried home, grabbed all my guns, and took my telescope to spy on the scene. Hidden from view, I saw 9 naked people gathered by 2 canoes waiting for the high tide to leave. After they departed, the beach was once again stained with blood and scattered bones. My anger burned fierce. I vowed to kill as many of these cannibals as I could if they ever returned. Days passed with no sign of them. Then, after a violent storm one evening, gunshots echoed over the sea. I ran outside and saw a flickering light. Far off in the water, more shots followed. It sounded like a ship in distress calling for help. I gathered dry wood and raced to the beach to build a giant signal fire. The shots came again. Maybe they saw me. Hope filled my chest. Tonight, I thought, I will finally speak to someone. I kept the fire burning until midnight, but no one came. The mystery remained, and the island kept its secrets. Chapter 21. Visitors. The next morning, I spotted the ship again. It was anchored far from the beach, eerily still and empty. My heart sank. I had expected survivors, the people who had fired the gunshots the night before. I longed for real human contact more than anything. Determined, I grabbed my canoe and paddled out to the vessel. The ship looked Spanish, battered and broken, clearly wrecked beyond repair. As I got closer, I spotted a dog aboard. He wagged his tail wildly, overjoyed to see me. I fed him bread and gave him water. He was famished and parched. But the men, there was no sign of them anywhere. What had happened? The mystery gnawed at me with no answer. The ship was littered with crates, small ones, large ones, many heavy, ones filled with bottles of alcohol I couldn't carry. But among the cargo I found guns and gunpowder. I loaded what I could onto my canoe, along with some other useful items. That evening, I returned to the island with several small boxes. Among my haul were new shirts, gold, silver, but more importantly, gunpowder. On the island, gunpowder was worth more than gold. And there was one treasure I desperately needed: shoes. I found 2 pairs aboard and took them gratefully. Over several trips, I stripped the ship of everything useful. Then I hid my canoe and returned to my routine. Time passed quickly, but my thoughts were haunted by the men from the ship and the cannibals on the beach. One night in March, I dreamt vividly. 2 canoes full of cannibals landed on the shore. One of their prisoners broke free, running straight to my house. I saved him. He became my friend and helped me navigate the treacherous waters around the island. I woke up with the dream still vivid in my mind. For the first time in years, hope stirred within me. Maybe with help, I could escape. Maybe I could rescue a prisoner from the cannibals. Determined, I began watching the beach every day for the next 2 years, scanning the horizon for their canoes. Finally, my patience was rewarded. One afternoon, I saw them, 5 canoes and more. Then 30 men gathered on the shore. I couldn't fight such a large group. I had to wait and observe. Through my telescope, I watched as they made a fire and danced around it. 2 prisoners, tied and helpless, were dragged forward. One was brutally beaten and killed. The cannibals used his blood to paint their bodies, turning the horrifying scene into a grotesque ritual, a twisted theater of cruelty. The other prisoner waited silently at the edge. When the cannibal's attention slipped, he suddenly bolted, running desperately in my direction. I sprinted to the beach and hid behind a tree, heart pounding. Only 2 cannibals chased him. This was my chance to save him. The man ran with everything he had, but the 2 pursuers were closing fast, their strides longer and quicker. Chapter 22. Friday. I prepared 2 guns and waited silently behind the tree. The prisoner ran straight toward me but didn't see me. I stayed perfectly still, hidden in the shadows. He ran past, and just then the first cannibal chased close behind. I sprang out, surprising him, and fired. He dropped immediately. The second cannibal, startled by the gunshot, fired an arrow at me. I shot him too before he could hit his mark. The prisoner stopped at the sound of gunfire and turned around, fear clearly in his eyes. I smiled reassuringly and gestured for him to come closer. He approached cautiously, then dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the ground. Slowly, he took my foot in his hands and gently placed it on his head, a sign of respect, I realized. I motioned for him to stand. He looked at the fallen cannibals, then inspected their bodies carefully, puzzled by the wounds. He pulled arrows from the bodies, likely trying to understand what had happened. We dragged the dead cannibals into the nearby forest and hid their bodies. Then we made our way into the deeper woods, heading for my secret cave. Inside the cave, I gave him bread, meat, and water. Exhausted, he fell asleep almost immediately. I took a moment to study him, young, slim but strong, with long black hair, dark skin, and a calm, pleasant face. I guessed he was about 25 years old. I stayed outside the cave, watching for any sign of the cannibals, but they didn't come looking for us. 3 hours later, he emerged, smiling wide with relief to be alive and safe. I started speaking to him and gave him a name, Friday. It was Friday after all, the day I saved his life. I told him my name and began teaching him simple words, yes and no. We stayed in the cave that night. The next day, we climbed to the top of the hill. I scanned the beach through my telescope. The canoes were gone. We were alone on the island. We cautiously returned to the beach, first stopping where we'd hidden the cannibals' bodies. When we reached them, Friday surprised me by wanting to eat the remains. Angrily, I stopped him. It wasn't right to do that here. I realized Friday was, in fact, a cannibal himself. We buried the bodies properly, then walked toward the shore. What we saw there was horrifying. Human bones scattered everywhere, the sand soaked red with blood. I asked Friday to collect all the body parts. I built a huge fire and burned them to ashes. Back at my house, I made a small tent for Friday between the two fences surrounding my home. For safety, I took all his weapons away, but soon I realized it wasn't necessary. Friday was honest and kind, like a child in many ways. I became like a father to him. Later, he showed me he would give his life for me, and I was grateful to have him by my side. I began teaching Friday everything he needed to know about life, the European way. First, I taught him new words. Hi, hello, bye, thank you. It was difficult at first, but I was patient and happy to finally